Has there ever been an intensive Harry Potter experience like this that you've had before?
I went to Misti-Con in 2011 in Orlando, but I love this. It's such a nice environment and everyone's so kind and caring. It's just brilliant.
So for those of you who have, how many of you guys have listened to our show before, Alohomora? Alright, so we have some listeners out there. How many of you guys, this is your first Alohomora experience? Awesome, that's really exciting. So just to give you an idea, for those of you who aren't familiar, what we do on Alohomora is we are doing a global reread of the Harry Potter series. So we decided that now that the books and movies are over, we really needed something to bring back the magic of Harry Potter. We decided what better way than to go back through the books week by week, one chapter at a time, to really dive back into the magic of Harry Potter. So right now, we are in Prisoner of Azkaban, and we're pretty close to wrapping Prisoner of Azkaban up. We're just a little over 1 year of having our show together. So we're really excited to continue that with you guys here today.
Yeah, so if you haven't listened to the show before, like we said, we're on Prisoner of Azkaban, so you can go in and listen to every episode we've discussed of Sorcerer's Stone, Chamber of Secrets, and we're up to chapter 19 on Prisoner of Azkaban, which is Servant of Lord Voldemort that we'll be doing next week. But right now, we're going to keep it a bit more general and the show talking about a few of the main topics that we kind of determined from Prisoner of Azkaban.
Some of the theories that are really big on our forums that just we can't take 4 hours and talk about on the show.
Right, yeah.
So we're going to talk about it here.
So that's kind of the rundown of the show. We're going to be talking about these topics, but a big thing we want you guys to be thinking of, you guys are welcome to come up to the mics and give comments if you have anything, but be thinking of what if questions. On the show we do a feature of what if, just any hypothetical question. Be thinking of him, because towards the end of the show we want to ask you guys
some good questions. Yeah. So should we jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the first topic we're going to talk about is animagi.
Okay.
Right? How do you guys say it?
This is the hot debate of anime guy versus anime jai. We've been fighting about it
for days.
Yeah.
It's Jim Dale versus Secret.
That's what I said. Yeah, it's the two audiobooks that are making everyone on the divide. So
right.
We're gonna say we determine anime guy.
Anime guy.
Anime guy.
All right.
Anime guy. Okay, perfect.
So should we jump right in?
We are.
Okay.
Yeah.
First question. What would Dumbledore do if he found out they were trying to become animagi? And this refers to the original Marauders. So if you go back to the books, Lupin actually talks about how Dumbledore had no idea. But what if he secretly knew that this was happening at the time? What do you guys think?
Do you think that he truly had no idea, or do you think that because I get the impression Dumbledore has a very soft spot for Lupin in that he was able to give him this solace, and that how lonely Lupin was. I almost feel like he would kind of turn a blind eye towards his friends becoming animagi, and as a way to just make sure Lupin had company.
Yeah,
I find it hard to believe that Dumbledore just didn't know, at least to some capacity, that something was happening.
So that means our guy Dumbledore is covering up for these underage, unregistered animagi. And yeah, so I mean, because this would not have been legal for them to be an animagus each.
Well, he has no problem keeping secrets.
Yeah.
We all know that.
It's just another way that Dumbledore's being a little shady out there.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I also think that if that's true that he doesn't, that he did kind of know, I would get the impression that animagi turning into one is a rather dangerous process, since you're, transforming yourself, transforming everything about you into a different species. Might have been irresponsible, unless perhaps he truly didn't know.
Well, that makes me think that maybe Dumbledore even helped him. We know Dumbledore was a transfiguration professor before he was headmaster, so maybe he even helped him become.
That would have been overstepping some bounds.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I think he turns a blind eye towards a lot of the stuff Harry does, even in condoning the time travel towards the end of Prisoner with Sirius and Buckbeak and everything. He kind of says it, and then he's like, I don't know what you're talking about when they, come back. So he tends to let people do things and just kind of be like, I didn't see it.
Yeah. that kind of we were talking about Animagi and Patronuses last night, because obviously this book has a lot to do with those two things, and we realized that I think we decided we know two characters who we know both things for. We know Minerva McGonagall's is a cat, and for her Patronus and her Animagus form, and the same thing for James Potter. He has a stag both times, and we don't know really any other characters for sure what their Patronus and their Animagus form is, because obviously there are very few Animagi in the series. So we were thinking, would they always be the same for a person? You know, if you were an Animagus, would your Animagus form and your Patronus form always be the same? So maybe this is a really great time for you guys in the audience to come share what you think.
Yeah, what would your Animagus be? And would your Patronus
Charlie, do you
be
want
the
to come up to
same?
the microphone?
Feel free,
Yeah, go
to this
ahead.
microphone over here.
Hello. I just wanted to say that I don't think it's true that it's always the same, because Snape's was a doe, and I don't think he would have a doe animagus, whatever. You got me all confused on how to pronounce it.
Sorry.
Yeah, and also about what you said, Dumbledore turning a blind eye. I don't think he would have turned a completely blind eye, because it was really dangerous. So I think he might have done what he did when Harry was going to Mirror Erised. He made himself invisible and watched in case something bad happened, and then he could have fixed it, because he is the Transfiguration Master, so he could have done that. And I think my Patronus would be like a black mamba snake. That's what I thought.
Wow.
Wow.
Nice.
Pretty intense.
If you were an Animagi, would you turn into that as well?
Yeah, I think that'd probably be what I was thinking. So yeah, although my friend thinks I'd be a panther. I don't know.
Oh.
So I'm going to give you a follow-up. If you don't, I agree that Snape would probably not be a doe. Lord.
We're getting some weird feedback.
So what do you think Snape's Animagus form would be if he wasn't?
Well, I mean, a lot of people would say he might be a bat.
Right.
That's what I was thinking.
But I think he would. I almost think he could be a lion, because because I feel like Snape probably could have gone to Gryffindor if he wasn't so sneaky, and I thought lions are kind of pretty and stuff like that. But I never. I'm just not sure. Yeah.
That's fair. Awesome. Thanks.
So that's interesting. So if Snape's Patronus is a doe, that makes me think that are all Patronuses the opposite gender of what you are? Or does that mean that there's something like essentially feminine about Snape? I mean, we know that the doe refers to...
Here we go.
Here we go, guys.
Listeners will know this is that moment in the show.
We know that the doe refers to Lily, right? The fact that he loves Lily, and that's probably her because James is a stag. But our Patronus is kind of like... what's that series? The Dark Material series. You have the
Demons.
right. Daemons are the opposite gender. So do we think that all Patronuses could be the opposite gender of the character? I mean, I don't
Hate to
know.
poke a hole in this theory, but Harry's is a stag. Stags are male. Harry is male. End of story.
Well, fine.
Shut down.
Then why is alright? So
Is Harry really a male?
And look what you have just started.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
well, I have some theories about that, but I'm not gonna get into that. But the fact that Snape's is a doe, do we think that gender even comes into play, or is it really arbitrary?
I don't think it comes into play because you have a lot of animals that's not set up like a deer, like you have a doe and a stag. Not all animals are set up to where you have like a binary gender like that.
Yeah.
Specifically in their name. So.
Yeah. I know we discussed on a previous episode the possibility of the Patronus being more of a representation of like who you are at the time, because we know that they can change. Like Tonks has changed for Lupin and everything, but that the Animagus wouldn't change. Like you wouldn't, if something about you changed, like still be in that Animagus
Like that's
form.
stuck forever, yeah.
Yeah. So we were kind of discussing the possibility of the Patronus being or like how you're portraying yourself at the time, and the Animagus being like your true essence. And then in some cases those might be the same thing. If people are truly being themselves, like it might be the same thing. But if someone changes pretty drastically, their Patronus might reflect that.
Ellie, do you know what yours would be? Your Patronus or your Animagus form?
I'm not sure about my animagus form, but I think that I would probably stick with Silver Doe because it's sort of my inner personality, I guess. They can be quite fierce and, out there, but then they're also quite content and shy sometimes. So I think I'd probably keep a Silver Doe for my Patronus, but I'm not sure about my animagus. I'm really not, because I have so many characteristics. It could be any animal.
I have another question for you. We were also discussing on an episode that just kind of how strange I found it that there's so few registered animagus. Like, it seems like such an awesome thing to be able to transform into an animal, all the different things you could do that humans can't. But yet, all these powerful wizards don't really do it. We only really know of McGonagall as a registered one.
But do they really?
Well, that's what we said. There could be unregistered ones. But would you turn into an animagus if you were a wizard? Do you see an appeal in it?
I think that sometimes it's a really good thing to get away with, because if you need to sneak out of somewhere or go somewhere and you're needed for capturing, then it's a perfect opportunity. But it can also be really dangerous. So I think that Dumbledore was I think he was also quite concerned when Lupin's friends tried to turn into animagi. But I think he did turn a blind eye because he knew that they were helping him in a way. So I think if I was given the opportunity, I might take it, but it's also really dangerous, so I don't think I would know what to do.
I thought of the fact that Lupin had been struggling all year with telling Dumbledore whether or not Sirius was an unregistered animagus. So it makes me think like Lupin kind of genuinely believes that Dumbledore had no idea, since he had been struggling with that conflict.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I do think it's a possibility that Dumbledore didn't have an idea. I know like the Weasley twins had like joked that some of the more like simple like things and people, like they're not as much attention is put towards them. That I don't know, maybe Dumbledore didn't necessarily think they were capable of it because they weren't. We don't really get the impression that they're very studious and talented wizards until later.
So real quick, let's say what our Patronus forms would be.
Animagus.
And Animagus.
I think both of mine would be a cat.
I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think the Patronus and the Animagus form is pretty much the same? Because
No.
we see this consistency throughout the books. No, we don't see this
No.
consistency throughout the books. Rebecca's telling
No,
me.
no, it's just that I can't imagine Rita Skeeter's Patronus being a bug.
A bug. That's so
A
true.
tiny bug fighting off a Dementor that
I mean,
just
you can-
kind of...
That versus a Dementor, like.
Yeah, that doesn't really
I mean,
work.
it would kind of like shoot through the Dementor. But a bug isn't going to really ward off a Dementor.
It's a huge bug.
Well,
But is the general...
big
The
bug.
cicadas.
The cicadas are coming.
Cicadas are coming.
I think both
Only
mine
one
would be a cat.
species.
I just do.
Yeah.
It fits me. Well,
No.
For 17 years.
just a coincidence. Yeah.
Noah, what's your?
I'd be a bunny rabbit
For both.
for both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Caleb and I are arguing because both of us want to be wolves. And
Well, I think actually mine would be different between the two. I feel like my Patronus is an Arctic wolf. I've always had that, like since I started reading Harry Potter. Since we got to this
That's
book.
very specific.
Yeah, it is. So that's how I
Game
know
of
Harry Potter.
Thrones.
That magic's real. But I actually think my Animagus form would be a falcon because I would want to fly.
That's cool.
So
So it's funny that you brought up Rita Skeeter because we were talking about what would happen if someone like stepped on her. Would they be
Celebration.
punished? Well, how would they be punished for that? Would they go to Azkaban? Because if they step on her and she's dead, they've technically killed someone. Good. What do you think?
Oh, well, I was just going to say, if you think about it, Barty Crouch Jr. was able to be replaced by his mother because she died while under Polyjuice Potion. So her, she still looked like him. So I think if, it's sort of similar, if an Animagus dies in their Animagus form, then they might just stay dead in their Animagus form. I don't think they transform back to a human. So I don't think anyone would ever know.
So the question about that though is after Barty's mom died, after the Polyjuice Potion wore off.
It doesn't wear off if you're dead.
Say what?
It doesn't wear off if you're dead.
Do we know that for sure?
Yeah, because
Well, Dementors are blind. They could have buried her without knowing.
Well, I don't think Dementors can bury people. I think there are like Aurors who are at Azkaban.
Well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe she was buried before it wore off.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, like, let's go dig her up. Let's go find out.
Brief interruption, guys, but do we need the mic to go around so that their voices can be picked up on a audio?
Yeah, if you guys have comments, please come up to this microphone just because we're recording the show so that our listeners can hear you guys.
So they might think we were talking to ghosts, but we weren't. We were talking to an audience of people.
Well, the ghost host is here.
The ghost host.
You just can't see him.
We're also getting a little bit of feedback. Should we move around with the mics a little bit to power through?
Yeah. Should we move on to time travel?
Well, do you want to read this comment?
Should we move on to time travel? Should we move back?
Well, we have this comment from our forums. Do we want to read that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you guys don't know, we have a really awesome set of forums that you can discuss the show on. And we actually, every episode, we pull a few comments from the forums to show what other people are thinking. And this one comes from a user whose username is DreamQuaffle. And the comment says, "There's no way to know for sure since we never actually see a character die in their animagus form. In Chapter 20 of Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius tries to ward off Lupin the werewolf in his animagus form and is forced to transform back into a human after he gets hurt. I don't know if it's easier to cope with pain in human form than it is when you are transformed into an animal, but I think it is most likely that if a person is badly injured, then they would find it difficult to focus on anything else, including maintaining a state of transformation. Going along with these lines, depending on how a person might be killed while they are in an animagus form, the pain of it might force them to transform back into a human and then die."
So you think it's a conscious effort? I think that's what this person is saying, to like stay in animagus form?
Yeah. Also, obviously none of us knows what it feels like to be an animal and be injured, but depending on, your form, if you were to get injured, perhaps it would affect you more as an animal if you're smaller, if you have like not as thick skin. Like, put it this way, like Pettigrew is like a rat. He can get stepped on essentially and be hurt pretty badly versus, a stag, which could still get hurt, but it takes a bit more of effort or force that maybe the pain of getting injured as an animal is more like painful than a human, and that's why they might choose to switch back.
What about even Sirius with the Dementors back? He was able to his pain wasn't so much, as you recall, because he was living in Azkaban as a dog for most of the time, and that's how he was able to kind of bear a lot of the sucky feelings.
Well, no,
that
it was like he got injured by the werewolf, so it was like physical injury.
Right, but I'm just talking in terms of, I wonder if you're in an animagus form, if pain itself is, as you're saying, not as much because you are in an animal form versus a human form.
So you're saying mental anguish?
Maybe mental anguish is slightly less because you're I mean, it's kind of tough. If you're an animal, you're still like really trying desperately to survive.
I'm pretty sure, I don't know if this was on, if we just decided this or if it was on Pottermore or something, but that you maintain human thought, which makes me feel like you have like a human brain and thinking capacity that you don't kind of take on.
I feel like it's the other way. I feel like you become kind of like Dog Toy. Do you want to come up to the mic so that your comment can be heard?
Well, actually, on that subject, in Fantastic Beasts and Quidditch Through the Ages, they're talking about how people, before they had brooms, they couldn't fly because even if they were transfigured into a bat, they wouldn't have human thought, which they mentioned was different from the animagus form where you do retain human thought, and that's just sort of a side note in Quidditch Through the Ages, that it's different from, like when you're transfigured into an animal, like when Malfoy was transfigured into a ferret, he had like a ferret's mindset because like he might have some of his human thoughts, but he's mostly a ferret. But like when McGonagall turns into a cat, she can remember things. Like in Philosopher's Stone, she is she's sitting on the brick wall all day and she's observing the Muggles, and she can see like Dudley going down the street, and she understands that he's screaming for sweets and stuff. So obviously, you do retain human thought.
You're absolutely right.
We've never really talked about the fact that Malfoy had been transformed into a ferret. That it seems like the spell Moody or Crouch seems rather simple for how much she's just transformed into a ferret. That it kind of seems simple. How is that different from transforming into an animagus?
So that means that Draco's mind completely became a ferret mind in that instance, and he really was a ferret. But Talia, you're absolutely right. Give her a hand. That was. I'm gonna take a step back. Usually, I go on tangents, and my ideas are like it's got to be this, but you're exactly right. But then. I still feel the fact that Pettigrew was a rat for so long. and Sirius was a dog for so long, I feel like in the books they each became kind of like that animal in a way, especially when they were back into human form. It was like Pettigrew was more kind of like Radish. So it's as if once you spend enough time in that form, your human mind becomes more animal. Talia, you're great. Anybody else from the audience have a thought?
Maybe that's how you become that animal. That you have those characters.
Hi, I'm Maggie.
We'll start with.
What I was thinking about this was that it seemed like animagus were like personalities. Specifically, I've been studying psychology, and the Patronuses were more like the specific traits that you had during life, which is why the animagus would be staying the same and the Patronus would be changing. And so, to continue on what we were talking about, the reason that someone would be more animal-like would be that their personality would be more fitting of the animal that they were in, and if they spend more time within that personality rather than developing human traits, they would become more basic and instinctual, I think.
And where does the human brain go? I mean, it's feasibly it's the same size brain, but like shrunk so that it can fit into that animal body.
You only use a quarter of your brain.
I think that has something to do with biology and genes. We all have all the animals in our genes, which sort of disproves one of your
Wait, what do you mean by that?
All of the they've done this with chicken eggs, actually, where they've made chickens into dinosaurs, and that means that all of the animals pretty much that have in the biological tree are in our genes. And so I think when a wizard turns into an animagus, they are like switching their genes to the specific animal that they are turning into, and depending on their personality, some genes are more accessible than others, which is how we get specific animagus.
Please, everybody, give her a hand. That was really cool.
I'm pretty sure we just think Charles Darwin like rattling his grave, though.
Well, no, we share
so yeah, I think we should probably like move on to time travel now, which is
my least favorite.
Something that really has taken off in the forum. Like we have a huge discussion going on about
It
time
makes
travel.
my brain hurt so badly.
Yeah,
It's like 22 pages long. No
And every comment is like a novel size of everyone's going on.
Yeah, because obviously this book brings in this like element of time travel. We see it happening throughout the series. We learn about it after that. Hermione has been doing it the whole time, but then it plays a huge role in resolving the conflict in the book. Yeah, something?
Yeah, so in terms of time travel, should I go into our theories? So when you think about time travel, there are several science fiction and fantasy series that deal with it over the years, and there are two like dominant theories about it. So you either have multiple universe theory, which is that every single time time travel happens, in each moment, a new universe is created, and therefore parallel timelines are created and are like pre-existing in some sort of parallel landscape. Or you have the idea that there is merely one timeline, and every time you use a time travel device and you go back in time, you always would have done that. So say Harry goes back in time before he was born, it would just so work that in the single timeline, Harry was there in 1945, fighting, like watching Grindelwald and Dumbledore fight or something, and then was also born later. So within the same timeline. So, like as you can imagine, I mean that's somewhat clear to me, but I'm sure it's still kind of iffy.
The opposite of clear to me.
Opposite to clear to Laura. In terms of how this kind of time works in the Harry Potter series, I believe it's the latter one. There's no multiple universe. It's that Ron.
Circular. Yeah.
It's the sort of circular theory that Harry and Hermione would have always gone back, and it's kind of in this loop because it keeps happening over and over again within that like time. Like how does that? So Ellie, you know a little bit about time because you were on Doctor Who. What do you think about the time travel in Harry Potter versus Doctor Who?
Doctor Who is quite different, I think, because you go back in time, but they've never been to that place before. So the Doctor can go back in time to another universe where he has never visited. So he won't see himself and have to worry, I've got not to get caught. But in Harry Potter, they're always worrying where they are at that point because they can't be caught by them because then anything will go wrong. So I think it's quite different in that point of way. But it's also really similar because they go back. Sometimes they go back for fun, the Doctor, and then they end up getting in a big nest and everything happens. But then in Harry Potter, they go back for a specific reason to get something accomplished. So
That's right.
I think it's different, but then it's similar in other ways.
And with time travel, if you do something or you change something, it's going to have drastic potential consequences. Consequences.
It's like the butterfly effect.
Yes.
What would you guys do if you saw yourselves? Like on
I'd kill him.
accident?
I'd kill him in cold blood. It's just me.
I feel like I would have to have a conversation. Like, I would have a lot of questions. I just want to talk.
I would just want to just observe for a while, like my mannerisms, and just kind of like sit back and like critique myself of like, oh gosh, like exactly what I love in the movie Hermione, where she said like, does my hair really look like that from the back? It's like my life, like that's all I would be worrying about. But I think if I was a wizard and like I saw myself in the time travel, I wouldn't be like, oh my god, like what is this world? I'd be like, why am I time traveling? Like what's happening? What goes wrong? I'd be less worried about just, oh my god, I'm time traveling, and more worried about why am I time traveling.
Especially if you knew, like, it'd say you were time traveling. Like
Yeah.
that's something that you do.
So that actually, because Dumbledore gives them this warning to like make sure they're not seen, because like it talks about like how wizards have gone insane, doing it. But I kind of agree that since they're wizards, that wouldn't probably like throw them off too much. And I think maybe Dumbledore is exaggerating the caution just so they don't see themselves really, so they don't mess up what needs to happen. I think he's just sort of like exaggerating that so they don't screw up, because his end goal is just them fixing the problem.
Well, I feel like if Hermione, and I think Harry would have been a bit more freaked out, but and also he was more emotional with.
That's always true.
With like the whole Pettigrew thing. But I think if Hermione had seen herself, like obviously she knows she's an avid time traveler, I don't think she would have been freaked out. But if you had seen yourself time traveling, and now you know obviously there's an issue that I'm time traveling to fix, like how could you then just go about the rest of whatever you were doing without freaking out of like, is this what I'm doing wrong? Is this what I'm gonna have to do?
How could Dumbledore trust these 13-year-olds? I mean, they're Harry and Hermione, but how could he trust them to actively do this? Or did he know from the start when McGonagall gave Hermione the time turner that this was going to happen? Which is a thought that I didn't have. Like we've kind of talked about this, but how was Dumbledore was this too risky for Dumbledore here, or did he really trust them, or did he kind of generate this whole thing?
Yeah, what's his level of involvement?
What's his level of involvement? I think we have a comment in the back. Would you just come up?
Dumbledore, the
Sorry, Talia.
ultimate puppet master.
A Ravenclaw, thank you. Welcome.
Please state your name into the microphone.
How did I get there?
I'm Cassie.
Hi, Cassie.
Or Morning Margot. Whatever. I think that Dumbledore isn't necessarily all-knowing, whereas he's just aware of all the possibilities. So like when McGonagall gave Hermione the time turner, he probably thought, this might be necessary later on. I don't think he knows, okay, something's gonna go wrong, because like if he did, why wouldn't he just fix it from the get-go? I think he's aware that there's a million possibilities of things that could happen, and he's constantly aware of how it can be fixed. And if he had the choice, I'm sure he wouldn't send 13-year-olds to do the job, but he knew that they could get it done, and he knew that it needed to be done, therefore he let it happen.
Really though, because I mean, he sent Harry into the Chamber of Secrets.
Well, it's all for the greater good.
He sent Harry to die for Voldemort as a pig for slaughter. I mean,
But I think he knew.
He has no compassion. That's a lie.
Disagree.
Okay.
But I mean, I think he knew it needed to be done. I think he knew that the Horcrux was in Harry and that he could come out of it. So I think he's not necessarily all-knowing, but he's well aware of everything that's going on around him.
Do you think now, like we know Hermione meets with McGonagall in the beginning for the time turner. How do you think McGonagall's reaction was, since McGonagall's more straight-laced? Which, even though I think
let's chill. You better not insult McGonagall up here. I'm wearing her shirt, so.
I love McGonagall. I'm saying, would she have been totally cool with Hermione doing this? I think she would be more concerned with the fact that even though she's so responsible, like this girl's still 13, being